Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we return to talking about Star Wars, and apparently Disney and the media backing it are still attacking the fans. Instead of manning up and admitting The Last Jedi sucked and it was their fault, Disney Star Wars and its minions are continuing to blame the fan base for their major misstep. We've already seen directors like Ryan Roundhead Johnson call the fans toxic man babies for not liking his movie. Hell, he's even started to blame Gamergate for his failure this week. Yeah, not kidding, but that's a whole other story. Today we're talking about a new article that features a new Star Wars director who's supposedly warning the fans if they keep boycotting and making a fuss about things, there will be consequences. Sounds like a bit of a veiled threat to me, but maybe that's not what James Mangold meant. He's the new director of the upcoming Boba Fett movie, and he's also featured in an article from Express called Star Wars Last Jedi Backlash and Fan Boycott. Director warns there will be consequences. Sounds pretty serious, guys, like another attack on the fans, but let's give this a chance first. Let's go ahead and check the article out. The disturbance in the Force rumbles on. In fact, it's becoming increasingly difficult to see how it can be resolved before Episode 9 hits cinemas next Christmas. Fans furious with The Last Jedi are currently taking credit for the box office catastrophe of Solo: A Star Wars Story. They see Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy's Episode 8 as a heavy-handed and mishandled vehicle for social agenda, which betrayed every aspect of their beloved franchise. In return, some Lucasfilm directors and staff have called the rebelling fans women-fearing bigots. Now, another major Hollywood director has waded into the battle. Well, I have to say, be careful there, James Mangold. You're wading into quite the mess here. Johnson and Kennedy were, in fact, very heavy-handed with their SJW agendas in The Last Jedi. Of course they were. The movie had a pink-haired lesbian feminist in it, for Christ's sake. Denying The Last Jedi had a feminist agenda is like denying water is wet. It's right there, plain as day, presented with the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. I would recommend Mangold stay out of this dialogue completely at this point, if I were him. All these Star Wars creatives have done is make things worse, with their bashing the fans and not taking any responsibility for their failures. James Mangold is lined up to direct the planned Boba Fett spin-off. The acclaimed Hollywood veteran also directed movies like Logan, Girl Interrupted, and Copland. He lashed out at fans who attack directors of beloved franchises, warning soon no talented director will take on these projects. However, he also appeared to agree with the comment that Rian Johnson should not have subverted the Star Wars franchise so flagrantly. Okay, here we go. So that's what Mangold actually said. Not really the big threat and warning there will be consequences, like how the article's title implies. A bit clickbaity if you ask me. Really, Mangold is just making a simple assertion here. If Star Wars fans keep going after their directors, it is possible other talented directors will start to shy away from the franchise because of it. But is that really such a bad thing? These potential directors should be cautious about taking a Star Wars job. Chiming in on a storied franchise like this now is no easy task, and it's going to take a really great, confident director to pull it off right too. So in my opinion, this is good for Star Wars. Directors and other creatives should think twice before joining the franchise. This is weeding out the weak here, separating the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. And I have to say, besides that nitpick, I'm already starting to like this James Mangold guy here. He already has some great hits under his belt too, like last year's Logan, which was simply phenomenal. And he's also going to be working with the Boba Fett character, which of course is a fan favorite. Then to top things off, Mangold agreed with a comment about crying Rian Johnson and how he should have not subverted the Star Wars franchise so flagrantly. That's exactly what a lot of us were thinking too. Johnson purposely subverted expectations in The Last Jedi, to the point where he's killing our beloved characters off for no reason, and destroying numerous mysterious and open-ended plot points the previous movie set up, just to be an obnoxious little asshole if you ask me. Johnson is like one of those hipsters who thinks he's too cool to like anything normal or mainstream, or to make a traditional movie. He thinks he's so much better than us, so Johnson fucked things up on purpose, just to stick it to the fans. And Ryan's middle finger to the Star Wars universe was received, loud and clear, and now he's facing backlash from it, as he should. Mangold tweeted, "At this point, when work writing and directing big franchises has become the emotionally loaded equivalent of writing a new chapter of the Bible, with the probable danger of being stoned and called a blasphemer, then a lot of bolder minds are going to leave these films to hacks and corporate boards." He directly addressed the accusations from Star Wars fans that Kennedy and Johnson betrayed the canon storylines of legacy characters like Luke Skywalker. Mangold added, "Discussions of canon would be more fruitful if A, folks didn't assume anyone who disagrees is evil and incompetent, and B, there was recognition that rules of dramatic narrative demand something happen to characters since you saw them last. That is, they can't be in the same place you left them." Well, I think the first point reiterates what I mentioned before. Yes, this backlash is going to scare away some directors, but do we really want those easily scared directors working on Star Wars in the first place? Because I don't think so. If a director is swayed off a project because of the fandom, then he's probably not talented or confident enough to pull off the job anyway. And maybe if we had some of this going on before, we could have avoided having Rian Johnson join the franchise altogether, who before this was known for directing Looper. an okay sci-fi thriller, but it's a pretty terrible movie when you start to look into the plot and all the holes with the time travel stuff in it. As for Mangold's next comment, saying people shouldn't assume anyone who disagrees with them is evil and incompetent, well, I think that's true, and it goes both ways too. Of course, fans shouldn't assume directors or actors are evil for disagreeing with them, but I think it's more important to note the other way around. The Star Wars franchise and its creatives should not be assuming its fans are evil man babies, just because they didn't like the bullshit movie The Last Jedi. I mean, is it really appropriate for a director to take to Twitter after his movie's released and chastise fans for months and months on end? I don't think so. The Last Jedi came out 6 months ago now, and Crying Ryan, the Roundhead Johnson, is still raging on Twitter about it, calling fans sexist women haters, man babies, and worse sometimes. And I think that's pretty damn embarrassing, not just for him, but for Star Wars altogether. However, when he continued his argument that filmmakers need to be allowed freedom to pursue their own vision, one commentator pointed out that this is a wonderful idea, except when you were working on the 8th film in a 9-movie story arc. Mangold agreed and simply replied, true. This would clearly imply that he also feels Johnson had a duty to the fans and the franchise above his own personal vision. However, Mangold also implied that it was not Johnson's fault. Well, this sounds like a bit of back and forth to me. First, Johnson had a duty, making the 8th entry in a 9-part saga, but then Mangold claims it wasn't Johnson's fault too. Then whose fault was it? I mean, I don't think it was all his fault, but a big majority of it was Johnson's fault. Rian Johnson had full control of The Last Jedi. He wrote, directed, and casted and everything. Kathleen Kennedy has some blame on her too for hiring and giving free reign to the guy, but after that, I don't know who else to blame. Executives at Disney obviously played a role in this too, but it's pretty easy to see Johnson at least is partly at fault here. I think Mangold is just trying to be professional and doesn't want to throw a fellow director under the bus. And that's fine too, but I will happily throw Johnson under the bus for him. Johnson even acts like he's guilty here. He's kind of like Hillary Clinton after she lost the election in 2016. Instead of quietly fading away after their embarrassing failures, both Johnson and Clinton continued to parade themselves around in the media, talking shit to anyone who hated on them, which is almost everyone at this point. Now, while Hillary did her sad little book tour, signing copies of it in Costco right next to the toilet paper aisle, well, now Johnson is obviously continuing to squirm around on Twitter, lashing out at fans every day. These guys just won't die, will they? They're like cockroaches. And although Johnson may pretend it's the fans' fault for not liking his shit movie, I think deep down inside he knows he's the one who really fucked up here. And maybe he thinks going on Twitter will help with the damage control or something, but really, he's just making shit worse. Mangold added, if you feel the filmmakers are just corporate tools and powerless, then why bitch at us? In the case of Rian Johnson and Mission Impossible director Chris McQuarrie, I assure you these cats are not owned. They actually fight your battles behind the scenes. Johnson has seemed so sure of his movie it is hard to imagine what changes he might have fought for. With 18 months to go until episode 9 is released, it will be fascinating to see how this situation develops. Yeah, well, it's obviously not looking too good for Star Wars right now. Even though J.J. Abrams is coming back to direct the next one, and I think he's done a much better job with the series. He did direct The Force Awakens after all, but damn, Abrams has one hell of a mess to clean up after The Last Jedi. And that's not even mentioning the fact that Rian Johnson is still scheduled to write and direct a whole other Star Wars trilogy. What the fuck, Disney? Can't you guys take a hint? Jeez. It's almost like they're trying to piss their fans off at this point, so they really shouldn't be surprised when the fans become more and more pissed then. Next, before we go, let's take a quick look at a video about this topic. This article's clickbaiting author, Stefan, actually appears in this interview on CNN to talk more about this story and also the release of Solo: A Star Wars Story. Check this out.
So much for being with us. What happened with this?
Hi, no problem. I think it's a combination of many factors. I think there's been a growing ill will towards Disney. There's been a lot of problems with the Star Wars franchise. And there's a lot of talk online, on social media, on YouTube video commentators about a boycott. So there is actually quite a fan backlash where people are choosing not to go and see the film as a protest against their unhappiness with Disney's handling of the Star Wars franchise.
Close, but there's a little more to it, guy. The reason Solo flopped was because first, The Last Jedi sucked really hard and everyone hated it. This killed excitement for another Star Wars movie. Secondly, Solo was never a movie anyone wanted to be made. It's a lame prequel and a cash grab attempt at milking old characters from the franchise. Sure, it turned out to actually be an okay movie at the end of the day, but moviegoers don't come out to see okay movies which they're not really interested in, especially after the last film in the series failed so hard.
And this will also probably tie in with some sense of fatigue. It was only been 5 months since the last Star Wars film, so general audiences also might not be so enthusiastic or so hyped up for another Star Wars film.
Actually, no. I'm gonna have to wholly disagree with the fatigue argument. Sure, there is some fatigue out there now for Star Wars, but there really doesn't have to be. They say this like it was inevitable, but other movies and franchises have made it work, namely the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They release 3 movies a year at this point, and no one is complaining about fatigue over there. The last 2 Marvel movies were only 3 months apart too, being Avengers Infinity War in April and Ant-Man and the Wasp, which just came out last week. And that movie is doing very well at the box office right now. So I think blaming the failure of Solo on Star Wars fatigue is really not fair. It's kind of a cop-out actually. If they had someone running Star Wars like how Marvel does, they could come out with 3 movies a year too and it would work. Star Wars has enough room in its franchise and in its universe, but no, because the real problem here isn't fatigue. It's that Kathleen Kennedy is in charge and she keeps making horrible creative decisions like greenlighting Solo and hiring Rian Johnson for The Last Jedi too.
Is it this particular movie or is it this sort of strange battle of forces between the traditional Star Wars diehards and Disney? What's going on with that?
Oh, there's a major battle. There's a lightsaber battle going on, and I'm not sure you could say everybody was happy, and also declining in terms of box office. The first film took over $2 billion, The Force Awakens. The Last Jedi took $1.3 billion. That's quite a large drop.
Let's not forget Rogue One made $1 billion itself in between those 2 movies. And these guys are also seeming to forget that there was controversy and hate from the fans before this. The Force Awakens saw the return of Star Wars under Disney, and while it was mostly well liked, there are still a lot of people out there who think it was derivative and a cash grab, which it kind of was. I really like how South Park put it in one of their episodes about The Force Awakens. They said something like, it didn't feel like a new movie with an original story to tell at all. It really just felt like a Happy Days reunion special or something, or like the Star Wars holiday special even. All The Force Awakens did was bring back all the favorite Star Wars themes and plot points into a sort of remix or cover song version of the original movies. With that said, The Force Awakens was still widely liked and the people accepted it, but everyone seems to forget about Rogue One. This guy doesn't even mention it, but Rogue One was pretty controversial when it came out in 2016 too. It ended up being decent and well liked and it made $1 billion, but I think it's worth noting how things progressed here. A lot of people hated Rogue One when it came out, so let's not pretend Solo is the first bump in the Disney Star Wars journey. It's really been a bit rocky since day one.
Is it time to put the franchise to bed? I mean, could it just be that?
Well, Disney's not going to want to hear this, let me tell you, because they've already announced another 3 films with Rian Johnson, who is the director of The Last Jedi. They've announced a 3-film story arc with the producers of Game of Thrones. So Disney are really hoping that you're not right.
She's not right at all. Even though normies might not be into sci-fi as much, the Star Wars fan base is still strong and it could even grow more if they did it right. There is an audience for these movies, certainly. Disney just needs to start listening to the fans more, and they need to aim things at their actual audience. Kathleen Kennedy has been steering this ship to go after this imaginary audience that doesn't really exist. There are no social justice warrior girls and trannies out there who want to watch feminist Star Wars bullshit. Let's face facts, people. Star Wars fans are mostly middle-aged white men who like science fiction, and there's also a lot of kids who like it too, but they're mostly boys as well. Sure, there are girl fans out there, and I'm sure there's even a couple of SJWs who watch The Force Awakens once or twice, but Star Wars really needs to remember who its actual demographics are. Pander to the fans you have here, Disney, and stop trying to cater things to an audience that doesn't exist. In the end, thankfully, the new Boba Fett director isn't actually threatening the fans. Not really. Mangold hasn't pulled a full Rian Johnson yet, but he better dial it back a bit and be careful though. That was close, but really, this story was an example of a hack, clickbaity journalist from the UK speaking for the Disney Star Wars franchise on their behalf. Stefan here was the real one warning fans about boycotts and attacking directors, saying if they don't stop there will be consequences in his own title. But I think Stefan may just be stoking the fires for clicks here and trying to get views. While it appears he may have a hint of what's going on here in Star Wars, but he's also missing the bigger whole story. It seems like the main part's eluding him. In actuality, Star Wars will probably still be okay, but it is on life support, and it's going to need some major retooling and fixing up if it's going to get its shit together by the time episode 9 comes out next year. There's still plenty of time, but unlike what this guy did with Rogue One, we are not going to forget The Last Jedi, or Solo for that matter. It's time to get your shit together, Disney. I would start by firing Kathleen Kennedy and canceling Rian Johnson's trilogy if you really want to turn this thing around. What do you guys think? Was the director Mangold threatening fans? Will Rian Johnson ever admit his failure? And should Kathleen Kennedy be sent out to pasture? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. See y'all next time.